Hello everyone, my name is Neena Siddiqui. Today I'll be doing a lecture on the learning approach and on the lesson of Bandura et al. Study. This study is very popular, it's a classic study, and I am going to be going along, starting off with the behavioral approach a bit so that you guys have idea, because behavioral approach is part of the syllabus. And so behavioral approach as to how it explains how learning takes place. So we are going to look at the key behaviorists behind the key behavioral theories. So let's begin. Okay, so before I begin the lesson, I would like to tell you that I am a CAI certified teacher to teach the syllabus of 9990, and I give private tuitions as well. And you can reach out to me whenever you feel like you need any kind of assistance or help. I give one-on-one tuitions or to students all over the world. You can contact me through my email, which is in the details of my channel. Okay, and and remember to comment and like and share this video with your friends. Okay, so all of you must be familiar with the cartoon of Tom and Jerry. And when I began this lesson, I asked my students that what comes to your mind when you think about Tom and Jerry? Is it funny? Is it fun, or it's not funny? And take a moment to think about it and let me know what is your idea. And you can write that down in the comments below. So mostly my students come back to me that they say that, oh, it's hilarious, it's so silly, there's like so much aggression going on, but thinking of a small 3-year-old or 4-year-old watching all of these kind of cartoons with so much aggression in it, it really makes us think twice about whether these kind of cartoons should be allowed to kids or not. And they are absolutely banned in a lot of countries now because of so much aggression in them. And why do you think aggression should not be shown to the kids? Why? What would happen if the kids would watch aggression and aggressive cartoons? So this brings me to the question of what do you think? Watching violent films decreases aggressive actions. It's catharsis, it's cathartic, that when you're going to watch something violent, it's going to just help you release it. Or watching violent films increases aggressive action. Social learning theory. That is the social learning theory. Social learning theory says that we learn through imitation or learning. Now you can see that this baby over here is copying all of the adults who are praying in a mosque. And this baby is also copying. And this is something very commonplace. You get to see a common sight when babies mirror and parrot every behavior that they see of adults. And that's one of the ways in which they learn in the world. So this has implications. Now this brings me to this ad, which I have put in the link in the information below, and I want you all to watch this ad. It's a very famous ad. It says children see and children do, and it shows very vividly how children catch up on all sorts of behaviors which the adults are doing, and how bad repercussions it has on kids' behaviors. This is the link over here, and I'll be sharing it in the information below as well. So have anybody heard about rage rooms? This has become a very popular phenomena, and in the West there are rage rooms, and now they are coming, they are spreading all around the world. People in the countries, you have these kind of rooms in which you are allowed to go and create havoc, and and destroy things, and hate or take out or unleash your aggression as much as you want. And I have put in a link about the anger rooms or the rage rooms, and how a psychologist says that is it good or bad to have such rage rooms? What do you think? Do you think it's going to be helpful? This is the link of it. I'm going to be putting it up below also. So there's a debate. There's a debate that should we create such scenarios, because this is not a very healthy way of taking out aggression, right? Because you cannot just beat up everybody and anybody whenever you are angry. That's not the healthy way to go around working with your anger. There are more socially acceptable ways and more adaptive ways of dealing with anger, which psychologists suggest are more appropriate than these kind of behaviors, which can get you into trouble. And because they become addictive and they become habits. If you're becoming aggressive, you can see that anger is very addictive. Okay, so this brings us to the question of why do we do what we do? This is what we're going to be doing in the whole of syllabus of psychology. Psychology students, you've got to think about why do we do what we do, right? The behaviorists say that we do what we do because we have learned it. Simple as that. And how have we learned it? Through classical conditioning. And that is, what is classical conditioning? That is learning through association. We have associated one stimulus with another stimulus, another response, and then that's how we are going to, it's a game between stimulus and response. And operant conditioning says that we have learned it through rewards and punishments. Rewards and punishments is one behavior where one way in which behavior is manipulated, and it motivates behavior. Also, it strengthens and weakens behavior. So we are going to do this also. I'm going to explain this theory to you in detail after a while. And social learning theory, it is learning through observation and imitation. So this is the learning approach, and under the learning approach, these are some of the behaviorists whose names you must be familiar with. There's Ivan Pavlov. He is basically a physiologist, but he did experiments and which kind of gave him findings which were helpful for psychology. Then Watson. These are the people behind classical conditioning. They did a lot of Watson did a lot of experiments on classical conditioning. Then Skinner did a lot of work on operant conditioning. He worked with pigeons, he worked with cats, he worked with a lot of animals to explain the behavior that they learn through reward and and punishment. And then Bandura is what we're going to be studying today. His work that is on social learning theory. Okay, so when we come to classical conditioning, first of all, I want you to understand what is classical conditioning. Okay, so to begin with, let's look at this cartoon. You can see over here, the dog is looking at the bell and the bell is going ding, ding, and bell is a neutral stimulus for the dog. And the dog is saying whatever, right? Bell doesn't mean anything to the dog. And but what about food? In the next picture, you can see on the left, there is on the right, you can see that there is food, and the dog, as soon as the dog sees the food, it says, "Yoo-hoo, I got food." And the dog starts salivating. Salivating is that when you start producing saliva, so to digest the food, right? That means your mouth starts watering when food comes near you, or you have to eat food, where then, saliva is secreted. So this is a normal response. This is a reflex response. You have not learned it. Everybody, even a baby, when it is born, it has not learned to secrete saliva. Saliva is secreted automatically. And so this is not a learned behavior. But what if I would say that the dog would start salivating at the sound of the bell? The bell is not food. The bell is not going to satisfy any hunger. But what if I pair the bell with the food? And again and again and again, I ring the bell, and they then give the food to the dog, and I ring the bell, and then again I give the food to the dog. And this process I call conditioning, in which I associate one stimulus, that is bell, with another stimulus, that is food, and the dog continuously sees bell, food, bell, food, bell, food. Oh, and then all of a sudden only the bell comes and no food comes. Even then the dog is salivating and saying, "Yoo-hoo, I will get food eventually." and the dog will salivate even when there's no food present. And then that is, the dog has learned to associate food with the bell. So the bell has now, it's no more a neutral stimulus, it's become a conditioned stimulus, and a response of salivating will be the conditioned response um, after conditioning. So I'll show you in this figure also. Now over here in picture 1, you can see the food is the unconditioned stimulus. That means it is not something which is learned, or it's going to just automatically produce saliva. That is an unconditioned response. That means it's not conditioned, it is not learned, it is an unlearned response. And then in the second picture, you can see the bell is rung, and the bell is a neutral stimulus. The bell does not secrete any, does not create any unconditional response of salivation. But when in picture 3, bell and food are paired again and again, then what happens is that after a certain while, after conditioning has taken place, the bell starts, when you ring the bell in picture 4, you can see that as soon as the bell is rung, the dog starts salivating. And that, now this salivating is called the conditioned response, because it's a learned response. Now bell shouldn't secrete saliva, right? Bell is not a stimulus which should secrete saliva. And this is something that you can apply to yourself also. When there is a break time bell in your college, you know that it is time to eat food, and automatically, you wouldn't even know, you would your stomach will start growling, and you will start feeling water in your mouth, as and so because you know that now it's break time and I'm going to go and have some lunch or whatever, right? So this is something which is also very useful in understanding phobias and fears. Fears are also learned. Something which is very neutral, for example, cat or a dog, which may not be very harmful also, like a puppy. Maybe puppy is not harmful, or maybe a height, or maybe lifts, anything. There are so many phobias. And buttons, for instance, so people are scared of buttons also. So that is something harmless. It's a neutral stimulus. And how has fear become associated with it? This is what classical conditioning tells us. So this is the explanations of all of the classical conditioning, the different various steps before conditioning, during conditioning, and after conditioning, what happens. And you can pause the video and you can look at this. Now, whenever you see a cow like this, you'll know it's Pavlov's doing, because now the bell is ringing in the cow's ears, and the cow thinks that, okay, now it's going to salivate. All right. So what about operant conditioning? What is operant conditioning about? Another theory which you're required to know is called operant conditioning. And it is simply, in simple words, if I explain operant conditioning, it is learning through rewards and punishments. Okay, so what do you understand by learning through rewards and punishments? So now you can see over here. First of all, let's go to reinforcement. Reinforcement is a fancy word for reward. Okay, so simple thing is that I want you all to, for instance, you people did a very good job at test, and I give all of you all great marks, or great, you all get good grades. That is a reward. That is a reinforcement I've given, so that next time also you do the same, and I will say good job, well done. So praise could also be a form of positive reinforcement. Reinforcement is anything which strengthens the behavior it follows, and it's also satisfactory, and it creates a happy state of affairs for the individual. The individual is happy in the end, remember, always for reinforcement. Okay, and when reinforcement can also be negative. Negative reinforcement is when something which is painful is taken away to create a happy state of affairs. For example, I would say that you guys did so good at the test, I'm not going to give you the assignment for next week. You can have a break. So I took away something unpleasant, right? I'm just supposing that the assignment would be something tedious to do and not very welcoming. So I would take away something unpleasant to create a pleasant state of affairs. And then next time also you guys will say that, okay, we will do better at the test now, because Miss doesn't give us more assignments if we do good in tests. So in that way, I can reinforce you. I can strengthen the behavior of getting good grades in the test, that students working hard. Okay, and then What about punishment? Punishment, the word punishment is pretty common. It's quite self-explanatory, but still I would like to explain it and define it because you're required to know the correct definition of it. Punishment is anything which creates an unsatisfactory state of affairs, which is unpleasant for the individual, and it weakens the behavior it follows that follows the punishment. Okay, so for instance, if you guys did a terrible job, or you guys were making a lot of noise in the classroom, let's suppose, and your teacher comes in and the teacher says that now you all are grounded and there is no break time you're going to have. So this will be punishment. Or you did not work hard in your test and you got bad grades. That is punishment again. So this is called positive punishment. That means you give it straight away. You add something to the environment to create unpleasant state of affairs and weaken the behavior that it follows. And then what about negative punishment? Negative punishment is taking away something pleasant from the environment to create a unsatisfactory state of affairs. For example, over here in this picture, you can see the doll is being taken away from the girl and she is very upset about it. It's a kind of punishment. For example, if you guys did not do good in the test, right, I would say that you all are grounded now. You will have now 2 more tests coming up because you people did not do good in this test. So now over here, what I've done is that, you know, I have taken away some leisure time of yours, right? Something pleasant, something like, you know, that now you'll have to work more hard and have more tests. So take away something grounding or giving punishment, or, you know, no break time, or stuff like that. No pocket money, for instance, parents would do that, you know, taking away the cell phone, stuff like that. These are all negative punishment. So I hope operant conditioning is clear to you all. Now, this is another video which is very popular and very funny. It tells about the Albert experiment. Little Albert experiment is very popular, and Watson did this experiment on little Albert, and Albert was made to learn to be scared of rats. And initially, Albert was not scared of rats, and he was not scared of white objects, but a horrible bang sound was associated along with the rats and the other objects, and those objects also started eliciting the fear response and the cry response from the baby. So this is what it's saying, that, you know, fear is also learned. So you can look at this video, and this is also a very interesting one. You can look at either of these. I will put the links in the information below. Okay, so social learning theory. Social learning theory is by Albert Bandura. This is Bandura, and simply it means learning by observation. That learning is through imitation of the model's behavior, or imitative learning. So this is just a cartoon for you all to remember to differentiate between Skinner, Pavlov, and Bandura. Okay, so Bobo doll experiment. What is the Bobo doll experiment? It's very popular, you know, in these times. And I want you all to look at a BBC video, a clip from a BBC documentary, which I have added in the list below. And it shows that how it has clips from the Bandura's original experiment as well. So you will get to see how, what was Bandura doing, what was those kids doing in the experiments, and you will get to see the whole thing. So this study is basically about aggression, right? The study looks at how aggressive behavior develops in children, and the 2 social issues that the study addresses. First is aggression an innate feature of the behavior. That means it is aggression inborn. Are we born with being aggressive, or do we learn it? Does a child learn to become aggressive, or the child is born aggressive? And so male aggression towards women is a feature of natural male behavior. This has a lot of repercussions that we can justify aggression, right? Because there's no fault of the males, right? If they have got more testosterone in their body, they will be more aggressive, right? And therefore, you know, this basically kind of lets them off the hook. But that is not something which is very appealing to, you know, come to terms with. So what about the aim of the experiment? Now, there are 4 hypotheses in this experiment. The first is observed aggressive behavior will be imitated. What does this mean? This means so children seeing aggressive models. Now there are models in this behavior, in this experiment. You will get to see that there were people who were there was a male and a female model who did aggressive acts, and the children saw those models doing aggressive acts, and then Bandura wanted to see whether they are going to follow through and behave in the same way or not. So first assumption is that observed aggressive behavior will be imitated. That means children are going to look at aggressive behavior and they will imitate the aggressive models, okay? And observed non-aggressive behavior will be imitated. And then children are more likely to copy same-sex model. Okay, so that means, you know, if the girls are watching a mummy-like figure hitting the Bobo doll, then girls are more likely to become aggressive and do the same thing because mummy is doing it, so I can also do it. Or, you know, if boys are watching a daddy-like figure doing an aggressive, being aggressive with the Bobo doll, then it's like it's daddy behavior, it's good behavior, you know, that means if daddy is doing it, it's something good, so I will also do it, right? It's something acceptable and it's impressive. So you will see that whether boys, when they will see a male model, will they become more aggressive, and girls, when they see the female model, will they become more aggressive as compared to seeing the male model. Boys will be more likely to copy aggression than girls. Okay, so this is a big question, that will boys overall be more aggressive than girls? Okay, this is the YouTube clip which I talked about. And now there are some IVs over here. You know, IV stands for independent variable. That means the variable which is manipulated by Bandura to see the results of the dependent variable, that is aggression. And there were various measures of dependent variable as well, which we are going to see when we are going to look at the results. So independent variable is what he manipulated. Okay, so what he manipulated was, first of all, the type of the model. Okay, so what type of the model was there? So was the model, you know, male or female? That is the gender of the model. The type would be aggressive or non-aggressive model, okay? And then learner's gender, that means the child. The child's gender is going to be manipulated also. That means there's going to be a girl or a boy watching a male model or a female model. So there are 3 things that you have to remember, 3 IVs. If the question comes in the exams, what are the 3 IVs in the study? Then these are the 3 IVs that you're going to talk about. Okay, so let's come to the sample of the studies. The sample consisted of 36 male and 36 female, and they were all selected from a nursery school of Stanford University, and ages range from 37 months. Mean age, right, is about 4.5 years. You can just say that they were around 4.5 years of age. And this design is the design of the experiment is matched pair design. So if you have done the chapter on experimental psychology and all the research methods, then you must be familiar with this, what is matched pair designs. Matched pair design is simply that when the participants are matched on a certain criteria or a certain category. Now over here, you know, boys and girls were matched in terms of aggression, because it's very important. Some people are born more aggressive, right? It is true also. Aggression is just not completely not inborn. Some people have more higher tendency towards aggression. Okay, it is determined by biology as well, but to a certain extent. So therefore this had to be or you know, of course, it's also determined by what family background the child is coming from. So if the child has seen a lot of aggression, because they are 4.5-year-olds and they have just not come out of the mother's tummy, so they must have seen some aggression either on television, or either they would have seen some aggression on you know, in the house. And then obviously that would also come and play act out, in the experiment. So they wanted to see that everybody is same in terms of aggression, and then we are going to put them in the experiment and see whether they are becoming aggressive or not. Because if they were already aggressive and they're doing aggressive acts, then there's no point about it, right? First, you're going to see that how aggressive they were, and we don't want some kids to be more aggressive than others. And the scale measured physical aggression, verbal aggression, aggression towards inanimate objects, and aggressive inhibition. So what we did was that there were two teachers who were sitting there and watching these kids play in a playtime, and watch for all of these types of behaviors, and measured physical aggression, verbal aggression, and all that, and match them on their various levels of aggression. Okay, so after they have been matched on aggression, what did Bandura do next? Then he divided the subjects into 8 experimental groups. So there were 72 participants in all. Okay, and so you can see that there are 72 participants, and in the aggressive model condition now, and there are 3 conditions: aggressive model condition, non-aggressive model condition, and control condition. Okay, so let's talk about the aggressive model condition. So the aggressive model condition had 24 participants in it, and non-aggressive also had 424, and control condition is the one in which there is no model is shown to the subjects. Okay, so one condition is when the model is aggressive, one condition is when the model is non-aggressive, and one condition is when no model is being shown and the children are just playing on their own. You will get to see the procedure, and then it will become more clear to you that how things are going on. Okay, and in the aggressive condition also, one time, there will be a female model coming in and beating up the Bobo doll, and then male model will come in and beat up the Bobo doll in the aggressive condition, and there will be 6 boys and 6 girls in the female model condition, and 6 boys and 6 girls in the male model condition, and the same will be followed in the non-aggressive condition. So first of all, 6 girls and 6 boys come in the aggressive condition. Okay, and they see the aggression, and then we'll see what happens. And then there are 6 boys and 6 girls. They could be with the female model, right? They could be with the male model. There will be different conditions in that. So what is the procedure? In stage 1 of the experiment, children were brought to the experiment room by the experimenter, and the room was set out for play, and the activities were chosen because they had been noted to have high interest for nursery school children. One corner was arranged as the child's play area, and there were small table, chair, potato prints, and picture stickers. After settling the child in the corner, the adult model was escorted to the opposite corner of the room, where there was a small table, chair, tinker toy set, a mallet, and a 5-foot inflatable Bobo doll. And after the model was seated, the experimenter left the experimental room. And so, what did the model do? So there were different conditions on which that the model is going to do what and which condition. So if the model was in the non-aggressive condition, the model ignored Bobo and assembled the tinker toy in a quiet, gentle manner. And in an aggressive condition, the model began by assembling the tinker toy, but after 1 minute turned to Bobo and was aggressive to the doll, and in a very stylized and distinctive way. And after 10 minutes, the experimenter entered and took the child to a new room, which the child was told was another games room. So this is room 1, and this is what it looked like with all of the things. Okay, And what about in stage 2? In stage 2, the children were subjected to mild aggressive arousal. Why this was important? Because, aggression just does not happen like that. Frustration is a precursor to aggression, right? So they have to be a bit frustrated in order to feel angry. So how are we going to frustrate these kids? So what Bandura went about doing was that he kind of told them that you go to this room and this has all the fancy toys. It had so many nice fancy toys over there, and the children were not allowed to play with them, and they were just shown those toys and said that now you have to go because these are for some other children. Now you can see this is room 2, and these are all the fancy toys in room 2. Okay. And all of this time, right, the children were being watched through a one-way mirror by the observers, and they were making observations of 5-second intervals. Therefore, about 240 response units for each child was obtained. So there was a lot of observations being made, and this is room 3. Room 3 is where they were taken to after being frustrated, and then now they have toys which are aggressive toys and non-aggressive toys both. Bobo doll is also there. Now we're going to watch what are they going to do. Are they going to hit the Bobo doll just like the model did? Are they not going to? Are they going to be verbally abusive to the model, to Bobo doll, just like the model did, or not? If they did not see the model, or if they are going to be more aggressive even when they did not see any aggression. So let's see, is it being learned or is it not being learned? So this is a footage of the model, and you can see that in the first column, in the first row, you can see the model beating up Bobo doll and hitting it and kicking it. And in the second row, you can see the boy doing the same aggressive acts. And in the third row, you can see the girl also hitting the Bobo with the mallet and kicking and repeating the same behaviors. 3 measures of imitation was obtained. The observers looked for responses from the child that were very similar to the display by the adult model. These were imitation of physical aggression, for example, punching the doll in the nose; imitative verbal aggression, for example, repeating phrases like pow or sock, even in the nose; imitative non-aggressive verbal responses, for example, child repeats, he keeps coming back for more. That means you coming up with your own kind of imitative response, non-imitative response. Imitative non-aggressive verbal response, that means anything you're just saying. That was also recorded. Okay, so they also looked at 2 types of behaviors that were incomplete imitations of the adult model: mallet aggression, sits on Bobo. Now you can see that what was happening was that they were looking at behaviors which were different from what the model did. It's not that whatever the model did, the kids did the same thing. They behaved in a maybe their mallet was there, so did they do any aggression with the mallet, or did they sit on Bobo, right? If that happened, that was not something which the model had done. But this is a category which will be noted down. If the kid sat on Bobo doll, then the tick will come that yes, sits on Bobo. If the kid hit the Bobo doll with the mallet, then the tick will come that yes, mallet aggression is there. Punches Bobo is another category. Aggressive gunplay is another category. Non-imitative physical and verbal aggression. Okay, so this is just a cartoon for you all to have fun. Okay, now you can see that this is very, very fancy and this very colorful. I've made it for you all so that you can clearly see it. I'm not going to go into all of the results, but I'm just going to explain 2 key findings from these results, right? The first thing that I want you to look at is in the, if you can see the arrow, right? First of all, imitative physical aggression. Now you can see the females, right? Now when the girls, right, had a girl model, right, or a mummy-like figure being aggressive, the girls were, how aggressive were the girls? The girls were aggressive as 5.5. Okay. And how aggressive were the boys? Boys were aggressive about 12.4. And what about when there was when they were aggressive in the aggressive condition, and there was a daddy-like figure who was being very aggressive? What happened to the females? The females became more aggressive, right? It's not 5, it's 7 now. So the females become more aggressive also when they saw daddy-like figure being aggressive. And the males became super aggressive. They become 25.8. So this is a very, very high number. As you can see, this is the highest on this whole table. So they become very, very aggressive when there was a male model who was being aggressive, and when boys saw the male model, they were very aggressive. And what about verbal aggression? So verbal aggression is that, what do you think? Who would copy more verbal aggression? Girls. Well, girls copied more verbal aggression when they saw the female model being aggressive, and boys did not do a lot of verbal aggression. It was only 4.2, 4.3. And you can see the verbal aggression for the female model is 13.7. Okay, so you can pause and you can go through this chart. I'm going to just explain it to you briefly. What are the key results? So boys made more aggressive acts than girls, number one. Okay. So boys were more aggressive than girls. For those children exposed to aggressive model, the number of imitative physical aggression exhibited by the boys was 38.2 and 12.7 for the girls. When exposed to aggressive female models, the number of aggressive instances exhibited by girls averaged to about 57.7 as compared to 36.3 aggressive instances exhibited by the girls. And boys in the aggressive condition showed more aggression if the model was male than if the model was female. Okay, this you have to remember, a very important detail. When the boys saw daddy-like figure being aggressive, they became more aggressive. Results. The girls in the aggressive condition also showed more physical aggression if the model was male, but more verbal aggression if the model was female. This is also another thing that you've got to remember. Pause it and read it again and see that you can comprehend what I've said just now. And the exception to this general pattern was there also. But you just have to remember this thing, that when the girls were watching a lot of verbal aggression, and when the female was doing verbal aggression, then the girls did more verbal aggression. Okay, evaluation. I'm not going to go into a lot of evaluation. I'm just going to take one idea, because evaluation is an important question in paper 1. You have a 10-mark question on evaluation. And in evaluation, you've got to follow the P method, and in which you have got to make a point, and then you've got to give evidence, and you have got to give an explanation. That's how you're going to form your paragraphs, right? And that's what the evaluative paragraph is all about. If you're not going to you phrase your context in that way, then you're not going to get the evaluation answer right, and not get good marks. So let's take up one example over here. Let's say that we are trying to evaluate Bandura et al. Study. Okay, now we are looking at evaluation, means we are looking at the strengths and the weaknesses of the study. Okay, so let's look at the strength. So one strength, according to me, right, or according to the book, this is from the book. So the book says that one strength of the Bandura et al. Study is a laboratory experiment. So what? Always ask yourself, so what? Because the examiner is going to not assume that you know everything. And so you've got to explain yourself again and again. So it was a laboratory experiment. This is your point. Okay, so what? So if it was a laboratory experiment, then you can control a lot of extraneous variables. It is a controlled environment. Okay, so So what if I control a lot of extraneous variables? When you control extraneous variables, your study is more valid. And then you're going to talk about, so what, it's more valid. When it is more valid, then it is of course acceptable, it's credible, right? But you've got to give evidence. Okay, so what were the extraneous variables? What extraneous variables did Bandura control? So you're going to say that this was done by showing, well, first of all, aggression was controlled. Okay, children were both in experimental groups, and groups saw the model for the same length of time. That was one thing, because length of time did matter. If the length of time was more or less, this would have made an impact on aggression. If you're watching aggression for like 1 hour, let's suppose, and the other kids just saw it for 1 minute, then that's not fair, right? They saw so much aggression, and how, so why wouldn't they be more aggressive? So that's not going to be a standardized control experiment. Your extraneous variable is going to confound results. And then what else? And each condition, the behavior was standardized. There was a scripted behavior which the model or the stooge was supposed to do. The model was told that this is what you're going to do first, then the next, after this, this is how you're going to go about doing. And every time, in every condition, they did it like that. There was no difference. If they would behave differently for different participants, then this will also confound results, because we will say, oh, these kids were watching something different, these kids are watching something different, right? What are you saying? They all must watch the same thing. So that is another variable which was controlled. And this was possible only because it was a lab experiment. So the behavior was controlled, the time length was controlled. You can mention these two, give two evidences, and say that lab experiment, laboratory experiment is good. And this is a strength of this study, because extraneous variables were controlled, like time, like behavior was standardized. And this means that the research is more valid, and the researchers could be sure that the differences in the results of the conditions was due to the differences between the models, and it's more reliable. Okay, so you can also follow another thing, that is inter-rater reliability, that was also obtained over here when there were two observers sitting and they were watching and measuring them for aggression, and that is also a strength. Okay, so there are more, there's a weakness also of this study. This is with regard to demand characteristic. The main measure of the dependent variable was through observation. As observations are behind one-way mirror, the children were unaware that they were being watched, and this increased validity, as they are likely to behave naturally rather than responding to demand characteristics, as they might have done had they known that they were being observed. The observation period was divided into intervals of 5 seconds each, and the categories were clearly defined: imitative, non-imitative. Okay, so this is another strength of the study, that there was no demand characteristics. Okay, that means the children saw the study, and it seemed like quite natural for them, right? It was like just like everyday life. It was not very much different from the aggression which happens, which does not happen, which would be very unusual for them. Okay, and also they did not know they were being watched. If they knew that somebody is watching them, an adult is sitting and watching them and judging them, then they would not be aggressive, right? So this was a very important thing which had to be controlled, because otherwise demand characteristics would come in. What are demand characteristics? Demand characteristics are when you try to figure out what is the experimenter demanding from me. So the kids are going to say, oh, what does this guy want me to act like, kind of thing, and I'm going to act like that. Oh, this guy wants me to behave nicely, so I'm going to behave nicely. Or this guy wants me to act aggressively, so I'm going to act aggressively. They're going to think about their own possible reasons, or or demands from the experimenter. Okay, I'll take one weakness also before I end the lesson. Among the weaknesses of the study is that only 6 children were used in each experimental condition. This makes it a very, very small group, and individual differences are there. So although individual differences with regard to aggression was controlled, but still this becomes a very, very small sample, as when you take one small group of 6 participants in one condition. So it would have been better if the participants were more. Okay. Another thing about this is that it has raised ethical issues because you are exposing them. You can take the idea of ethics and say that, another problem with the Bandura et al. Study is that it's unethical because it is exposing the children to aggressive aggression. And you are allowing the children to watch aggression and be aggressive, and that is not acceptable, right? So, but considering, right, the importance of the study, it was accepted. The ethical committee allowed Bandura to conduct this experiment because it had a lot of repercussions in terms of in terms of everyday life, as to that children must not watch a lot of aggression because they will learn it, right? So this is another table which is going to help you understand that how you're going to formulate your P paragraphs, right? It's got 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses, and this is how you're going to write down your 10-mark answer. You are going to talk about 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses, make a point, give evidence, and give explanation. If you want to learn more about the P paragraphs, you can always contact me and I will give more information about it. So that's all for today. And I'm going to meet you all very soon with another lesson. And until then, goodbye.